All right, welcome everybody back to the Two Stewards Show. My name is Brent. I'm here with
Mark.
And today we got an interesting topic because we want to talk about young people in the real estate market. And this has been something that we've both kind of heard a lot about recently, coming in from different channels. People asking, how is it possible for a young person to buy a house today? Are young people just going to be priced out of the market? And this is an emotionally driven conversation because a lot of people are thinking about their kids or their grandkids. And I guess there's not really an easy answer, an obvious answer. Mm-hmm. So we're hoping today to just kind of talk about this topic and shed some light on it from our perspective, what we're seeing on the streets, and hopefully some of the young people who tune into this or parents of young people can kind of glean something. So with that in mind, as a background, let's jump into this. Why? First of all, I think that it's important to know, why do you actually want to own a piece of real estate? Mm-hmm. Because the question is always, I'm a young person. I want to buy a piece of real estate. Why can't I do that? Because it's too expensive. And people think it's almost like a given that you just should buy a house. So why do you think that is? Why should you want to own a house, in short?
So there's, I guess there's a few different answers. We're coming from a real estate background where we can see, and we've seen it happen with so many people, and it's a proven concept that real estate is the pathway to wealth. A pathway to wealth. Not the only one, but it's the best. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, right? Why it's the best pathway to grow wealth and become financially independent over time. So we don't need to rehash all that, but that's one strong reason. Not everybody's interested in that either. We have a backdrop as well in North America of this emergence of the middle class, right? And maybe not just North America, but the sort of the Western world, the emergence of the middle class, and that's sort of a unique phenomenon in history. But along with that, our sort of recent memory means that we have this expectation, right? And that's just sort of a cultural thing that our parents were able to get married, buy a house, and get on with their lives, and we should be able to do the same
and
thing.
In many cases the parents were making a single one income, right? Dad goes to work, mom stays home with the kids, kind of thing. You have one income, you're able to afford a nice family home, and so that expectation, I guess is what you're saying, it carries forward to generation to generation till today, when the next generation is growing up and they're looking at the housing market going, why can't I have the same life where, one of the spouses works and the other one gets to stay home and take care of the kids. And it seems unfair, right? And so, I guess that's why you're trying to paint the picture of the historical framework, the context for people. So what's another reason why you would want to own your own home, though? It's a good investment, but I think there's more to it. There's other aspects to home ownership that make it desirable.
It's not all just about money, right? I mean, that's important. But even, I don't know, if we kind of look at some more biblical perspective, right? I know that if I want to, and I know not everybody shares this perspective, but biblically speaking, we generally do, right? You want to get married, find that person that you can spend your life with and praise God with, and then also have children, right? And I know even that perspective is changing in some churches, but generally, you're going to raise a family, right? So it's hard to raise a family in a one-bedroom apartment. You can do that as a couple. You can live in a one-bedroom apartment just fine. But once the little bambinos start coming, things start to get tight, right? And we were talking about that earlier. I think people in that situation where that worked for a while, And now it's like, oh man, I'm kind of stuck in this place, and I got a bunch of kids. And
yeah, I think that's where the word starter home comes from, right? Like you're, you get married, you find a place, and that's usually, hey, we're not going to be living here forever. This is where we need to start. Yeah. I think the pinch that everyone's feeling, the young people especially, is that those starter homes are becoming, less and less attainable, and they're almost like, forever homes for people. Once they get into them, they have a hard time. I guess they have a hard time attaining that starter home to begin with, but once they get in, they kind of benefit from the appreciation of that, and they can move to the next level. But it's those people who aren't able to buy, a regular bungalow, that are kind of getting left out. So, yeah.
It's tough, but I think there are a lot of good reasons to own. And I also hear the argument, people say, like, renting is better than owning because you're going to pay more, and it's true, right? Your mortgage payment may be lower than your rent payment, especially now.
So it might be prudent for a young person to rent, at least for a while, financially.
Yeah, possibly, while they're saving up, and so this is my opinion, while they're saving up a down payment.
Right.
In the longer term. And so the argument is, like, I can rent, and then with the difference that, the money that I would have to pay in, whether it's, property taxes, insurance, and especially upkeep of the home, because there's costs towards that.
Yeah.
I can invest that. And then if I invest prudently, I will do better. So, like, yeah, theoretically.
Well, then eventually you'd be able to have enough savings to buy.
No, just rent forever.
Oh, okay.
And then eventually you've got your retirement fund that you from that differential, right? So I think in practice, though, like, there's human nature, and then there's also your investments. Because people will typically use, right? They'll be like, well, if I do the S&P 500, here's the historical returns, right? Like, who invests in the S&P 500? Unless you're doing
with enough self-control to not sell everything every time something changes or goes down, or so you're kind of describing, like, a young person, they could either rent for their entire life and take the money that they save that they otherwise would have spent on home ownership costs, like property tax and all this other stuff, which is most of the time encapsulated in their rent, but they would put that in an investment product outside of real estate and hopefully have enough savings at the end of their kind of working career to retire off of that.
Yeah.
But if they don't have the self-control to not sell their stocks and whatever, at the end of the day, real estate is kind of a safe vehicle, right?
Well, yes, but this is one of the things that always irritates me when people are making the comparisons to real estate. And I've written about this as well and done a side-by-side comparison of investing in the stock market versus investing in real estate. Residential real estate always comes out ahead. But the one assumption that is always used for the stock market is that, again, you're taking an index return over 50 years or whatever, right? When in fact, nobody ever does that. Like, very rarely would somebody take, their extra $500 a month or whatever it is and put it into an ETF that is solely based on the S&P 500 or something like that, right? Typically, they're buying different stocks, mutual funds. I mean, I sold mutual funds way back when, and often it was the mutual fund industry was designed, I felt, more for the managers than the investors because of the just all the fees and everything, right? So when you look at your returns, they're great, and then you take your fees and you're like, oh wow, the returns aren't actually that great. So the point is, people making these assumptions, like, show me a real world example of somebody who's not a financial genius, because maybe you could identify these stocks that are going to do really well and you're a very active day trader, but most people aren't like that. So in reality, I don't think that works. And then you said something else too. Mostly
this is a tangent here.
Oh yeah, here we go. No, mostly you said that's all encapsulated by rent, right? All the costs of home ownership. And that makes sense, right? Very few people are going to rent out their house for less than the carrying costs of that house.
Than what it costs to own it.
Yeah, sometimes you'll be break even because you're counting on equity growth and stuff.
So here's where I think the opportunity is for in terms of renting. So if you choose not to buy a piece of real estate and you think it's better to rent and then invest the difference, that's definitely one avenue. But where I think that can go well is if you can rent something below your means. Like if you can find something that no one wants to live in because it's so cheap or whatever, right? You can really get ahead because those places do exist, right? And they might take a bit of digging, and it might take quite a bit of a sacrifice in terms of lifestyle to get into that. We could talk about that when it comes to actually buying your house too and living a sacrificial lifestyle in your own home. But when it comes to renting, like, you can find a really nice house and rent it, but it's going to be expensive. Or you could find like, fifth floor of apartment building, 1 bedroom little thing for, whatever they're going for right now, probably $1,200 but they're in not such a great area, right? And if you live there for a number of years and you sacrifice everything else, then you can definitely expedite your savings and grow them quicker, right?
Yeah, and actually there's another aspect that I guess doesn't get talked about a lot, but when you're talking about sort of biblical values, right? Hospitality is another important aspect, right? Something that we need to practice. And yes, you can practice hospitality from your 1-bedroom apartment for sure, but I know, just from experience, it's a lot easier to practice hospitality if you have more space, like if you had a house. Yeah. Right? So, no, for example, we have, we've got our basement apartment. I think we lost some video there, but the audio is still working, so we'll carry on. Basement apartment that we don't rent out anymore. We did Airbnb and we did long-term rental, but now we just kind of have that available, and it's often family, but sometimes other people as well, and that's just an option you don't have. If you're in a smaller space. So this is maybe not like the primary reason, but it's another reason, I think, for like a good reason to have a space where there's a bit more room and you can welcome people into your home. And you can do that in an apartment too, but a bit easier if you've got a house and a little bit more space, especially if you got outdoor space, right? Yeah, no,
that is a fair point. I just think when we talk specifically about young people, many times, like, you're getting into this, right? You're not likely don't have kids, going to school. You don't have big whatever. Like, it's kind of, you and your wife, and you just go off and, you kind of have your careers starting up. You have a lot of things on the go. So you're, a space that works for that period of your life. I think is prudent to try and find something that's below your means or significantly below your means for duration. But anyway, so that kind of paints a picture of like why you'd want to actually buy a house. I think there's other aspects to it as well. Like, there's the investment. So you have your money going towards something that you own. But then there's also like not just your money, but also your time. So like, on Saturday afternoon, if you want to, build a deck on your house, but you rent, like, it's not going in your pocket, right? This doesn't make sense.
No.
So for those who are handy, or who, maybe they work in the trades, maybe they, like to put time in, or to try different DIY projects, or whatever the case, owning your own home, especially when you're young and you have a bit of time available, then there's a lot of benefits to being able to put some sweat equity in and build the value of your home up over time. Because it's amazing what if you kind of dedicate yourself to it, what you can do over like the course of 3, 4, 5 years to improve the value of your home.
Absolutely. And that's a mindset thing too, I think, right? Sort of that long-term, like, I have something, I have to take care of it. I'm going to do things now that will benefit me in the future, or benefit my family in the future. And like, because we've talked about sort of the consumerist mindset of our society, right? Where it's instant gratification. Whereas you're sort of forced if you own a home, and especially if it's that starter home that's not great, like you prioritize, you live a little bit sacrificially because not everything is like wonderful and new and awesome, like the houses that you're renovating and putting out. And there's just, you have that timeline where, okay, we're going to make slow, steady improvements. And I don't know, I think there's something, I don't know, maybe I'm overstating it, but something a little bit noble about that as well, where you're just, you're suffering a little bit. I mean, you're not suffering. Okay, that's going too far, but you have a longer sort of time frame, time preference of your lifestyle, right? Where it's not that
I need to have everything fancy right now, even though I'm young. I need a nice car, a nice truck. I need, fancy whatever it is. And okay. So to sum that all up, to say like, you could rent. There's advantages to that if you can, like financially speaking, to like that's what we're talking about, right? Like stewarding your wealth wisely. So there's advantages to renting for a time if you can be prudent and invest on the side and be mindful to do that and take sacrifices in your standard of living. But there is a significant number of reasons for buying your own house. And I think a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are definitely on board, right? So they're on board. They want to buy their house, but they can't. So it's still out of reach, Mark. What do I do? You guys are talking about this because you already bought a house back in whatever, right? 10 years ago. Why should I listen to you? Like, what's my options? And so maybe somebody who hasn't bought a house, like they want to know what are the steps to even buy a house, first of all. But before we even get into like, how do we address the fact that it's out of reach for somebody? Like, how do they get a house to begin with? Like, what's the process like?
Yeah, so the process starts, way before you want to actually buy your house. I think most people are aware of this, but, let's spell it out a little bit. You need a down payment, right? And that's, again, one of the things that we love about real estate is that leverage aspect. So you do not have to save up 100% of the house price. And again, this is sort of a Western thing, right? In a lot of other countries, you either have to have at least 50% or 100%, of the value of the home saved up. So you're just doing a cash purchase, right? So that's a beautiful thing where in North America, in Canada specifically where we are, you need, if you're a first-time home buyer, you need 5% of the purchase price. And then you also need to keep in mind there's closing costs, there's, like lawyers and land transfer and other things that may pop up. So you need to have some money aside for that as well. The first step is saving up that down payment. And that's going to take a little while, and it's going to mean maybe a different lifestyle, right? Depending on how much you're saving up while you're meeting all your other obligations. But that often we see that young people are scrimping and saving, and they're not doing, vacations or having a nice car, all these things that you talked about, right? Which, when we think back to the, quote unquote, good old days when you're able to do this on a single income, right? There wasn't nearly the consumerist mindset that there is now as well. Right. And I'm not totally, that's not the difference here, the differing factor, but it is a factor that a lot of people don't get. Like, what do you mean I can't
go to Florida
go every 6 months on a flight somewhere? Like when our parents or grandparents were working hard and bought that first home.
They might have flew to immigrate to this country, but that's about the only time.
That's right. That's the only cruise they were on is a cattle ship to get here. But even like further on in the 70s and so forth, right? There wasn't nearly the consumerist mindset that there is now. So, maybe there are less options to spend your money, I guess. You can always spend your money foolishly, but that's one that's one thing. I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I just thought as you were talking about that, because like we're talking about what are the steps to buying a house, and the first thing you said is obviously saving up, and that's before we even buy the house. But in the back of people's heads is, hey, I've been saving up for a while now, and the house price just keeps running away from me. And that was kind of what we talked about inflation, right? And I think there's something to point out that you kind of mentioned before we were recording, but the fact that you kind of want to get in soon, right? Like it's almost like the ship that's sailing, and if you can get on, you can sail along with it. But if you don't make a decision at some point and make it happen, it might sail away from you, and it might be this gradual thing that happens at first, but then it might take off. And like there's other parts of the world where home ownership is not as prevalent because, like we talked about Europe, where a significant number of people rent because the house prices just doesn't make sense to own. But yeah, here we're kind of on the cusp of, if you can take action and make it work, make sacrifices. And I think it's going to probably take a couple things, like educating yourself on the whole subject, as well as, beg, borrowing, stealing to kind of expedite your savings. Maybe not stealing. Yeah, not stealing. But that's a saying. I don't know who says it. But,
they.
Yeah, they say. So, you basically have to save up the down payment, but if you can't save it up faster than inflation eats up the purchasing power of it, you almost have to take more drastic action. And if you believe it's important for you to own, and you think it's suitable that, you're the kind of person who would, maintain a property, fix it up, you can maximize the potential of the piece of land. Possibly you're renting out portions of it, or whatever the case, wherever it is, right? It could be like storage, like just rent your garage out. It could be your basement. You could live in the basement, rent the main floor. We can talk about that later too. Yeah. House hacking and stuff. But you want to make sure you kind of get on the ship whatever way you can.
Yeah, and that's often, if we're talking to young folks, we're just get in. Now, don't dive blindly in and like buy the wrong thing. Get someone to help you get the right place. But yeah, just get in. You mentioned Europe, right? And I really think we're on the way to that sort of model of home ownership or renting or whatever, right? So there's not the stigma in most of Europe that we have here. Of renting.
Against renting.
Yeah, like where homeowners are on one level and renters are on sort of a lower level, right? There it's perfectly normal. And there's a few reasons for that. Like one of them is that they have a much longer history of land ownership and house prices just getting out of reach for them. And there's different models as well, right? You can have multi-generational mortgages where it's just you own the house, but that just passes through the family. So you could have a 100-year mortgage or something in certain countries, right? And that's just it's what you got to do to make it work. So when people are talking here like, oh, house prices can't possibly go up further. Yeah, they can. And it's been thrown around here, right? Extending amortizations to 50 years, 60, 70, whatever, right? Maybe not seriously, but I think government's going to go that route at some point. So my personal opinion, we're going to be looking at that model in 20, 30, 40 years, and house prices are just going to go along with that. What were we I lost my train of thought again.
I was thinking about the scarcity of land.
Yeah. And just get in. Yeah, so that's what we kind of tell people. Like, there's bumps on the road, and with COVID, we saw a crazy spike in prices, and it's dropped back down. And people are like, see, I told you there was a bubble. Like, no, there wasn't. Yeah, there was maybe a little bit of a bubble during COVID, but overall, the real estate market is not in a bubble. It's not going to be, and it's going to continue to rise, and it's going to continue to become more unaffordable. So this is another reason, taking a longer view. So for people to get into it and to be prudent and to have home ownership is for their kids, right? When I look at my kids now, I know it's hard for younger folks to get into the market now and to to buy a house. I can only imagine for my 5-year-old how hard it's going to be for him to get a place.
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking ahead a little bit, I want to get a place, I want to get some real estate where I can make a down payment available to him when the time comes. And yeah, I know that's like, people are going to scream privilege, and I know not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Right. But, if you're in that place where you're kind of struggling right now, think about your kids or maybe your future children. What are you going to do for them?
Yeah.
And if you could help them out, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right? Because this is an option in Canada.
Yeah. And it's not even just your kids. It's, it could be your church community as well, because you look at a lot of things need money, right? Donations. There's calls for donations from churches, schools, you name it, all different causes, right? And that money has to come from somewhere. Yeah. And if you're kind of not owning assets that kind of keep up with inflation, and maybe you can make it work, but your kids, like you said, the next generation of the community is not going to be able to sustain the current things we have, the current institutions that are in place, and let alone improve them, right? So
and people sometimes will give us a little bit of grief too for talking about building wealth, like, oh, why are you so focused on money, and you can't serve two masters. That's true, but you can serve one master using money, right? Not mammon, not like that love of money and that where it's entrenched in your soul. But you realize that it's another tool. And you mentioned there's a lot of needs in the community, and it's a biblical imperative as well, is to take care of the widow, the orphan, right? All these people. You can't do that if you can barely take care of yourself. There's other ways with with your time, with energy, that you can be involved for sure. But it sure helps a lot if you have financial resources to be able to help people out. Because often, like you said, that's what it comes down to, is money, right? You can sit with somebody, and that's important. Sit with them, pray with them, be a friend, share the gospel. But at a certain point, if somebody just lost their job in your community and you've got to support them, a cup of tea is nice, but they got to pay their rent or their
they need to live somewhere
or whatever, right? So these are all good reasons for us to focus on wealth, not as an end to itself, but as an end to a different means.
Yeah. Okay. So for a young person.
Yes. Yeah. We got off track a little bit.
So now they know they definitely want to invest. They want to build their wealth. That's a prudent thing to do. They also want to buy a house. Some of the ways to do it, they got to obviously save up. 5% is kind of the minimum. 5% is actually an insured mortgage, right? Because so what that means basically is when you buy a house, as you put less and less down payment down, so you have less equity in the deal, it becomes more and more risky. So under 20% of a down payment, that's a threshold where the mortgage has to be insured. Yeah. So meaning that if you don't pay it, the insurance will pay for your mortgage. So there's insurance premiums when you go less than 20%. And if you've ever tried to buy a house, the first time home buyer program, like you can get 5%, but there is going to be this premium that's added to the end of your mortgage. And that just pays for the insurance premiums, right? So
I don't think that's such a bad thing anyways, because if you look at the opportunity cost of money, especially with the value of houses, I would rather every time put 5% down and pay a small extra premium, because I know I can take that other 15%, like if I had it, and like buy another house or put it to work somewhere else. Yeah. And I can more than cover the additional cost of those insurance.
So the idea is that 5% is a program specifically for first-time home buyers. Yeah. Like it's not available to investors who have a property already. You want to buy a second one. Yeah. Or multiple properties because, like you said, people see the value of leveraging up their money and that would get out of control. So, so somebody puts 5% down. They do have to be aware of the closing costs. You mentioned that before. Like you're going to have some legal fees when you close on a house. And usually when you're buying, you're not paying the commission. That's in the, like for the realtors, that's in the sale
That's right.
price, and the seller pays. But yeah, there will be a number of different closing costs that you have to be aware of and have the financial means to pay, but usually not too significant. But I think another thing to be mindful of when you're buying a house for the first time is you've got your down payment, you've got your closing costs, but you're also probably going to have some sort of renovations or improvements, especially when you're getting into, like for young people, they're going to be getting into a cheaper house, something that's in a poor state of repair, maybe. That's why it's maybe undervalued on the market and they can get in. So they're going to either have to have the skills and time to fix it up, or they're going to have some money set aside, at the very least, just to carry the property, and make sure that you can pay the mortgage, every month. So when I look at it, I see opportunities in properties that have future potential, and I look for, like I would advise a young person to avoid something like a condo. So condo is one category where you have fees and restrictions imposed upon you by the condo corporation that you can't really avoid. Another class of things I would try and avoid is something where the land is kind of at its highest and best use. So a recently built home, more densely populated areas where, like, you have townhomes, semi-detached, whatever, where the land that the home is built on is kind of maximized already. And there's no future potential. Like in 10 years, you can't build another unit, because really we talk about home prices going up every year and, land values going up every year. Part of the reason that is because, as we get increased population in the area, the city allows increased density in each individual lot. So if you're shopping for a house or a residential lot, and right now it's a single family home, in 5-10 years the city might allow 6 units on there.
Yeah,
who knows, right? And where the way the density and the population growth is trending, like the demographic situation, it's very likely that we're going to have increased density. It's just going to become the norm. It's become easier. It's going to become cheaper in terms of fees to convert homes that are single family homes to multi-unit properties. So when you say the price can't go up, like there is the one aspect that, it can, because of the monetary background and the macroeconomic situation. But it's also just, we have to fit more people on the land that we have. So if you own a standard lot in the city, maybe it's like a 50 by 100 or 50 by 120 piece of land, you can now all of a sudden do a lot more with it. So my advice generally to young people is, like, if you're on the cusp of being able to afford something, but it's a condo or a townhouse or something like that, and that's your decision, maybe you just want to get in the market and get it, and that's all you want to do. But I would strongly consider, getting a partner, like finding another person who can go in with you, or, a parent or some other party who can maybe boost your down payment and your qualifications, so you can actually buy something that has a bit of land and has more future potential. Because you're gonna spend a number of years in this house, or you're gonna rent it out, or whatever the case, and down the road you're gonna be able to take advantage of that value, right? So whether or not you're gonna actually develop it into multiple units, or take advantage of that, or you're just going to sell it to somebody who will, that person's going to pay more for the land too, right? So anyways, that I kind of glossed over, I guess, the qualification aspect of this whole thing too, because you have to save for the down payment. You're going to get an insured mortgage, but you do have to qualify for a loan too, and maybe we should touch on that briefly. Did we talk about that?
No, I don't think we did. Yeah, so qualification is important. And one thing I just want to mention is, for the down payment, you can get a gift from a family member. So in Canada, I think that's pretty well unlimited. In the States, I think it's limited to like $15,000 or something. So, but there's other rules in the States that can make it a lot easier to get that first home, right? Instead of 5%, you could be down to 3% or 1% with different.
So why do young people live in
credits.
Canada?
Well, that's a good point. And we're seeing an exodus from Toronto, especially from Ontario, of young families because they simply can't afford it. And then if it's not easy to migrate to the States. But if you have that option, why wouldn't you go somewhere where the house prices are generally, and depending where you are, much cheaper, and where you have just a lot of different financing options. So, I mean, I don't want to put that out there as an option, but it sort of is an option. Find somewhere else that's more affordable. But we'll touch on that in a minute, and sort of the what you're buying. But I just wanted to bring up the down payment. So, if you can, I don't know. I don't think there's any shame in getting a gift from your parents or your grandparents. Now, generally when you get that gift, it has to be accompanied by a letter saying this is a gift with no expectation of repayment. But that doesn't mean down the road you couldn't gift your parents or your family back an equivalent amount of money, right? That's an option. And one of the reasons that I said, if you're doing it now, think about your kids, right? Will you be able to actually help them out in that scenario? So the other thing, qualifications you talked about, you need to be earning money. So here's another argument for getting in right away. Generally, younger folks are working jobs, right? They're just getting into the job market, and they're getting experience. And we've talked about, starting your own business. Usually young people aren't doing that immediately. Mm-hmm. And if you have your own business, if you're self-employed, it's way harder to get a mortgage, right? You have to have like a lot of income, and a good mortgage broker can help you out with the qualifications here. But, just generally speaking, it's a lot harder. So if you've got a decent job, or maybe two jobs, because you're both working, you don't have any kids.
Maybe you got two jobs yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Or three,
right?
I don't know.
Yeah, now, like when you're young and you can do it, that's the time. Make that money, get the qualifications so you can get at least that first property, right? And because typically as you get older in church communities as well, there's more obligations later on, right? Usually young folks are not elders or deacons.
Yeah, time commitments.
Yeah,
committees.
All these things. Yeah, committees, school boards, all this stuff. There's not a lot of 22-year-olds that are on these, right? I mean, like there are some, especially with promotions.
Well, and the bank sees the T4 income as like, the safe, dependable source of money, right? So when you're qualifying for a mortgage, you go and you have your down payment, maybe part of it's a gift, and you show the bank, hey, look, I'd like to buy this. They're going to say, well, how are you going to pay for this loan? Well, I have a T4 job and I've had it for 2 years or a year or whatever, and here's my pay stubs. And the bank's going to say, okay, great. Like, but whereas if you have a business, and a lot of times I think young people who start a business, like they kind of go in this a little bit blind, and they think it's kind of glamorous to own a business. And it is like, it's a lot of work, and there can be a lot of reward to it if you do it right. But if you hit into the stumbling block of like the home qualification, that's a big obstacle for a lot of people. And especially when you're young, if you do make money in your own business and you want to buy a house, you might have a good down payment and a good cash flow to support a mortgage, but you can't get a loan because the bank looks at your self-employment income, says, well, what if you don't make that money tomorrow? Like, who knows, right? Yeah. So in that case, you actually need to have 2 years of history with your company.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times people who have businesses, like, there's tax reasons for not claiming income. Right? There's strategic ways to kind of plan your company and personal finances such that, you don't have to pay as much tax. Well, the bank doesn't like that either. So when you go to qualify for a loan and you own your own business, you have to pay yourself the money that you otherwise might not have, which means you need to pay tax on it. So it's the devil's in the details with this one, I guess.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the glamorous part of self-employment, by the way. I don't know when that comes. Is it like 5 years in, 10 years?
Yeah, I don't know. You're just a glamorous guy, Mark.
You got to create your own glamour a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It's a bit of glamorous. I think people have this concept in their heads of what it could be like. They see other people running their own business and they say, you know what, like that. I like kind of the freedom, the autonomy of what they're doing, right? Like they don't have to be here 9 to 5, like they can do whenever they want, right? And that might be attractive, but it can be really financially rewarding as well. But yeah, if you're looking to buy or invest in property, then a key thing to consider is mortgage qualification, and don't run into the roadblock of, having a great job and then not buying a house and then starting your own business. And 2 months later, you want to buy a house. Well, it's not going to happen, or not very easily. So there are options, obviously, if you have your own business to buy. But yeah, you're going to be paying. You're going to pay more, right? You're going to pay more to borrow because you're more risky. So whether or not you are more risky is whatever, but the banks who are underrating your loan are going to say, well, you are. So you're going to pay a higher interest rate. You're going to pay borrowing fees, like a lender's fee and stuff like that. So,
and at a certain point, you will hit that roadblock, like we did, being self-employed, and where you can't qualify for anything else, right? Whereas people with a T4 income,
which is just a regular job income, right? Like
regular job.
You have an employer, third party, family.
Like you have a much easier time getting to 5 properties and even to 10 before you got to look at some different, more creative methods of financing. But I mean, if you have a portfolio of 5 or 10 proproperties,
you got different things to worry about.
Yeah.
So maybe we can touch about how much time we got here. Maybe we can touch on the mindset aspect of this too, because I don't know if it's a cultural thing for young people or where they're at, but I think every young person is different, but maybe there's some trends that are going on. And I think it's key to remember that, if you want a home, like you have to work for it. You're going to have to put in the time. You're going to have to struggle for a while. And the other thing with home ownership or buying properties, like one thing to actually get the home, it's another thing to keep it and maintain it. And there is an aspect of, I think people who don't have a house, who kind of say, I want one, and they don't understand all the maintenance and the upkeep that is required. So that's something to bear in mind, right? And just in terms of mindset, like when you're approaching this and you're thinking, I'd love to buy a house and I think it's a good idea, it's a good investment. Just be prepared in your mindset that, like, once I get this property, I'm committed to it, and this is the one I'm sticking with. And I got to cut the grass, I got to shovel the snow, I got to fix the roof, I got to, keep on top of everything, right? And there's cost associated with that. There's time, right? You're going to have sacrifices. You're not going to be able to, hang out with your friends or do everything you want to all the time because there's stuff to be done. So,
yeah. And like, here's a little bit of a shout out to the trades as well. I'm a big proponent of young folks getting into the trades rather than, going into what is frankly a pretty toxic atmosphere in most post-secondary, institutions right now. And, stop me before I go on a tangent. But, trades have sometimes been kind of looked down upon, right? Especially by people who have sort of that post-secondary education and this is, you just have to. And there's an expectation, I think, in some circles as well that, there's sort of 2 tracks of life. And one is you go off to university and that's what you do if you're responsible and smart. And then for the other people, you go into a trade or do something else, right? Something more technical. And I don't buy that at all. And I've met a lot of smart folks in the trades. And I met a lot of dumb people too, to be honest. But this is a valid option. And if you happen to be in the trades, you generally, whether you're an electrician or a plumber or, something more technical, typically you can, being on job sites, you learn and pick up things from other folks around you on the job site, so that if you have a home, it's much easier. Like you already have some of the skills, and you can learn tons of stuff on YouTube out there about basic home repairs. So I just want to, I don't know, that's one of my little soapboxes is like young people and the trades. This is a really valid path for them. But yeah, because that can save you so much money if you can do repairs yourself. You have to do them right and up to code and all that jazz. But get a quote for doing something versus doing it yourself, right? I mean, rule of thumb that I always use anyways is, you take your materials and then multiply that by 3, and that's sort of ballpark as to what it would cost you to have somebody do a job. So if you can buy the materials and then you have spare time where you're not working anyways, right? That's your leisure time, so you're not like losing any money. You're just paying the cost of materials, and you install those materials, you're saving like 2/3 of the cost at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's so that's once the person gets the house, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've really answered the whole quandary around whether or not young people will be able to afford a house, but I think we really push for people to try.
Yeah.
There's valid reasons to do that, to be prepared to suffer in a sense and sacrifice standard of living, at least for a season in your life. And that comes out of live below your means. I think that's just kind of a good piece of advice in general. But when it comes to being able to afford a home in the future, or like a lifestyle, where you have a little bit more freedom, autonomy, you can, take your kids here and there and do different things, and help others. If you ever want to be able to be of assistance in a big way, you kind of want to live like no one else, so that later you can live like no one else, right? Like everyone else might be, out, doing whatever with their time, whereas you're screwing floorboards down, or you're insulating your basement apartment, and you're covered in insulation, and all your buddies are out hanging out and golfing and doing whatever, and it seems like, why am I doing that? Like I went through that in a period of my life as well, and like it's still reflect upon that a lot, because at a certain point, those experiences build your character, and they change you into, to realize the value of those activities, to realize the value of that work, and then, to value that accordingly when you make investments moving forward. But then, once you have a property and you're ready to move on to your next one, like, what it's worth, what to look for in the next one too, right? The mistakes that people made. So anyways, I'm going around in circles here.
I think maybe this is a good point to kind of wrap up, and then maybe our next episode we can talk specifically about house hacking, because I think that's that's a good topic we can delve into a little bit more.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so for young people, hopefully you took something out of this episode, and hopefully it doesn't paint too bleak of a picture. We hope to also in other episodes discuss the reasons behind why all of this stuff is happening, and get into, the background. And it's not just, guys, the house prices are getting away from me. Why, what's going on? We hope to answer that question in more depth as episodes go on, because it's a little bit too much to cover in this particular show. But hopefully you took something from this, and you can learn from it. So until next time, steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.